Good morning, sea turtles. I hope you have a great week. Even though I'm not there today, I still want to take a moment to talk about plot with you. I know many of you have learned about plot before, but when we read our first book of the year, I want to go through the main steps of plot. So plot is a sequence of events in a story that includes the following part. The exposition introduces the story, setting, and characters. This is the beginning of the book where we find out who the main character is, what their background story is. A lot of you may not have heard of this new term right here, inciting action. It's the first conflict or problem that appears in a story, and it's the conflict that sets the story in motion. If this conflict did not happen, then there would not be a story to tell. Rising action is the series of events that lead to the climax of the story, usually the conflicts or struggles of the protagonist. The action develops as the conflict becomes more intense and more complicated. So every step of the rising action, you're going to see more and more emotion as we get towards that peak moment of the story. That peak moment, of course, is the climax. This is the moment of greatest suspense when the outcome is decided. It's the most exciting or highest point in the story. You will know when you're at the climax because you'll be able to tell if a character is experiencing a change. Most of the time, your main character will undergo some sort of change that shows that this is your climax. After the climax, you have the falling action. And this is the sequence of events that follow the climax and lead to the solution. You're going to see the emotional level go down slowly a little bit because we've had that moment of change, and now how is that character going to move forward with that change? And then the last bit is the conclusion. There's actually a fancy French term that you can use. It's called the denouement. But the conclusion, or denouement, is the part of the story's plot in which the conflict of the story is resolved or worked out. This occurs after the falling action and is typically where the story ends. This is where all the loose ends of the conflict, that inciting conflict, come together, and now you have a very clear solution. This is take 2. My dog decided to bark in the middle of the last episode. So right here we have our plot diagram. This is a way of mapping out what is occurring in the story and figuring out the different pieces of it. Over here we have the beginning or exposition. This is where you write down about who the main character is and the setting, the time and place of the story. Right now, nothing major has happened in the main character's life, and they're just living their life. Over here, at this corner, this is where you place the inciting action. The main character is basically living their life and enjoying whatever is going on there until some obstacle occurs, and that's where the inciting action falls right here. Going up this line right here, we have all the rising action conflicts. Now you'll notice that as you progress towards the climax, they're going to get more and more emotional. A lot of the times too, you can have different levels of rising action based on how long the story is. So don't feel like if you have 1 versus 10 that it's a big deal. Right here at the top, this is the climax, or the point where you're going to see a character change in the main character. This will affect how the character proceeds for the rest of the story. The falling action is just like the rising action, except it's going towards the solution. The falling action can also have as many lines as needed, based on the length of the story. And over here we have the end or resolution. This is how the story ends. The conflict will have been resolved at the end or resolution. So we're going to look at something right now called episodic plot. If you look at the word episodic plot, you're probably looking at it and thinking, I see the word episode. What this means is that every chapter in a book has its own little plot diagram. So when we read our first book, Harris and Me, you're going to see that every chapter has a little rising action, climax, falling action. Chapter 2 is going to have a rising action, a climax, and a falling action. Chapter 3 is going to have a rising action, a climax, and a falling action, etc. This also connects to things like TV. If you watch a season of a show, you're going to notice that every episode you watch has its own little plot diagram within it. Now, the season itself may have an overarching plot diagram, but each episode is going to have its own plot diagram, making it episodic plot. Plot diagrams can appear a number of different ways. The first is what we just looked at, episodic plot, where you have lots of little episodes. The other way, and this is going to look kind of funny, is you can have episodic plots that look like this. The reason it may look like this is each of these are little climaxes. So, for example, episode 1, episode 2, episode 3. But then you're going to have your overarching climax, which is the biggest point of the season or book. And then, as you approach your resolution, you're still going to continue to have climaxes, but you're approaching the resolution or how the season is going to end. The last unique type of plot diagram is called a cliffhanger. And many of you have read books before where it ends and you're really not sure of what the full solution might be. These plot diagrams may look like this. Now, the reason it drops off so suddenly is to demonstrate that, there was a cliffhanger. There may not have been much in terms of falling action. You always get a resolution, though, and the resolution may be there is no resolution. The first book of the year that we're going to read, Harrisome, has a progressive plot. This means the climax or highest point in the story does not necessarily occur in the middle of the story, so the slant of the plot diagram can change. It will look a little bit more like a cliffhanger ending, but not quite as steep. The progressive plot in Harrisome will look like the plot line handout that you will get in a minute. In a few minutes, your substitute teacher is going to start showing you some Pixar movies, the short ones. You are going to look at these movies and try to see if you can plot the diagram for each of these correctly. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to email me. I miss my lovely sea turtles already, and I hope you guys have a great week. Remember, best behavior, do your homework, and have a great week.